Today we'll be talking about the failed MCU, and that is the DC Extended Universe. And why did it fail? So we'll be going over every single movie released by DCEU, the receptions of all the movies that released, and what's wrong with the DCEU. And no, Joker will not count in this video, because Joker is confirmed not to be a part of the DCEU, or Zack Snyder's version of Justice League. We're just talking about just the history of the DCEU in general. So, strap in your seatbelts, because we have a long way to go. So the first movie in the DCEU was Man of Steel. I have not seen this movie, and I probably don't plan on seeing it. But it got lukewarm reception of 56% on Rotten Tomatoes and a 55% on Metacritic. It had a 7 out of 10 IMDb, and the movie, of course, did okay at the box office, making $668 million at the box office. Off of a budget of $225 million. So overall, it did pretty well. So that is, and yeah, Man of Steel. I don't think people were expecting it to extend into a cinematic universe, and yeah, that's Man of Steel. The second film in the DCEU is Batman vs. Superman. Came out in 2016, and yeah, the movie got poor reviews across the board. There are people who do like this movie, but this movie also came out, though, was hyped up to beyond belief. Everyone wanted to see it because it was going to be the big movie of 2016. Civil War was also going to come out, but this movie was a big, massive train wreck. The movie did do really well at the box office, but it declined later on, and got very bad reception, a 29% on Rotten Tomatoes and a 44% on Metacritic. It's 6.4 on IMDb. Again, DC fans will just say, oh, this is just Marvel bias with the critics. The fact that our movies don't get good reviews, but this movie didn't really work. I actually did see it. It was just a very boring and drawn out movie. I'm going to compare Batman vs. Superman versus Civil War. Civil War did not feel drawn out. It felt, and also they didn't ruin characters for no reason. But Civil War, they had build up to this moment. It was like a big twist. Batman vs. Superman was trying to set up a cinematic universe, introducing Batman and Superman, and of course Wonder Woman slightly in the movie, but yeah, it didn't really do too well. And the next movie also got very bad reception. The next movie in the DCEU that released was Suicide Squad. I do not like this movie at all, okay, but Suicide Squad got pretty bad reviews, 40% Metacritic, the worst Joker probably in Joker history, and a 5.9 on IMDb, which is not the lowest score for a DCEU movie. Yes, not the lowest rated DCEU movie by IMDb. This movie was just another mess by DCEU. It had an annoying main character, but that's just my personal opinion. Don't, kill me on the internet for saying Harley Quinn is annoying, because it's just my opinion. But this is just another one of those movies that just come out and are just forgettable and are just not that great. And this movie was definitely better than Batman vs. Superman, because at least it had entertainment in it, but it still was not good at all. And the movie, and everybody was like, oh, and the biggest mistake they made was making this movie PG-13. Why? So they can make more money in this movie, so they can get a Chinese release? Yeah, mess. Moving on. The next movie was actually first good rated movie in the DCEU, and that is Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman actually unlike the last 3 movies, was the only DCEU movie to get good reviews. It currently sits at a 93. It had a 93% on Rotten Tomatoes, a 7.4 on IMDb, and I don't know why they're playing 1984. No, that's not 1984 trailer. But unlike its sequel, people actually liked this movie. And of course, this was before, all the great evil woke monster took over Hollywood, called Twitter. If this movie was made in 2019, I bet it would suck as much as Captain Marvel. But Wonder Woman got very good reviews by everybody. Everybody praised it for, everybody praised it for actually being good. The only things people complained about was the fight scene in the movie with the CGI. But other than that, everybody thought this was actually a pretty decent movie. But hence its high score on Rotten Tomatoes. And then we gotta go for Justice League. Not Zack Snyder's Justice League, the other Justice League that came out in 2017. So, this movie was, 40% and 45%. And this is supposed to be the big Avengers movie, basically. But this movie was actually originally planned to be split into 2 parts. But for some reason they said, you know what, let's just not let Zack Snyder direct his movie and put the guy from the Avengers. Because, everybody loved the Avengers. And this movie ended up being a failure. There are still allegations coming out to this day over what happened in the movie. I'm not going to go into those allegations at all. The movie does have a higher score on IMDb than, 3 other movies in the DCEU, but still 6.2 out of 10, 40% on Rotten Tomatoes, and 45% on Metacritic. And this was supposed to be the big Avengers movie. I think the big problem of this movie, I like this movie, personally. I thought it was okay, but the big problem of this movie is they didn't really set up the characters that much, okay? I know with the Avengers, they didn't really set up Hawkeye that much, so they had to set him up in the movie, but all of the characters in the Avengers, besides Hawkeye for some reason, were introduced in other movies beforehand as well. Like Flash had a TV show that was completely unrelated to the DCEU. Aquaman's movie was scheduled to come out after Justice League. And Cyborg, he was supposed to be introduced in the film like Hawkeye. So you have literally 2 important characters that did not have the movies before the movie came out. And I think that was one of the biggest problems with Justice League, is that they did not release the movie later. The thing that worked about the MCU is that they planned everything out. Justice League, they rushed it because they had to switch directors and everything. And we all know how well that works in movies. Soul Story did the same thing, and it was a big mistake. And a lot of other movies did this too, and it was a big mistake for them. The next movies in the DCU actually were positively received. That is both Shazam and Aquaman. Aquaman was actually the first and currently only DCU movie to reach $1 billion. It got decent reviews on Rotten Tomatoes and Metacritic and an IMDb score of 6.9. People actually liked Aquaman. I really liked watching the movie. It was pretty interesting and fun to watch. But, there were still people who still hated this movie, but this movie was still a big massive success, grossing $1 billion worldwide and becoming the second best-selling Blu-ray of 2019. Yep, it sold more copies than Captain Marvel, even though both movies grossed $1 billion. There is one controversy in the movie, but it's not related to the movie itself, and I'm not going to mention it. It involves one of the actresses in the movie. I think you know what I'm talking about. The next movie that came out was Shazam. So Shazam was the next movie that came out, and it was also the second movie of the DCEU to reach 90% on Rotten Tomatoes. It also has a pretty solid 7 out of 10 score. Shazam is actually a pretty good movie. It's a pretty underrated superhero movie. Definitely much better than and also Shazam is also known as Captain Marvel, if you didn't know that. Sorry, Marvel. that's what the actual history of the character is. He was originally, they even say it right here, Captain Marvel. Oh, yeah, Shazam was actually originally called Captain Marvel, but we don't want to get into that. I'll probably talk about that in another day about who is the real Captain Marvel. Is it actually yeah, it is Shazam. And there's a whole bunch of legal problems with the name Captain Marvel around sometime in the 80s or the 70s. So DC had to change the character's name to Shazam so they could avoid issues with Marvel. But this movie was actually relatively well received. And then we have the next two movies. Turds of Prey, which is the next movie on the list. Yep, this movie actually has a lower score than Justice League. Okay, I'll call it Birds of Prey, not Turds of Prey. I do not like this movie. Okay, I did not like this movie. The critics love this movie, but most of us, get this garbage out of here. It was also a big, massive failure, and it's unlikely they're gonna give a sequel to this movie anytime soon. And even, they're not making a sequel. Sorry, probably never because of how bad this movie was. The next movie in the DCEU was Wonder Woman 1984. And no, we're not going to talk about Suicide Squad, that's not out yet. This is the movie I was talking about how it was. This is what the movie I was talking about how it was worse rated than Suicide Squad. Wonder Woman 1984 was hated by everyone online. The movie scored a 59% on Rotten Tomatoes and a 60% on Metacritic, and the lowest score so far, 5.4. And when you look at the trailers, the movie didn't look like it was gonna suck that badly, but there's even thing. Is the Wonder Woman 1984 the worst movie ever? And there are queer people who are still complaining about this movie to this day, because this movie was horrible, boring, overhyped, corny, overrated, forgettable, cringeworthy, and slow. They really dropped the ball on this movie. Yep, they really dropped the ball on this movie. Really, and also, if you do want to see it, it is 2 hours and 31 minutes. That's the same length as Infinity War. Yep, Infinity War is the same length as Wonder Woman 1984. Yep, same length. And yeah, nobody liked this movie. Okay, we'll actually mention Zack Snyder's Justice League. And guess what? They actually listened to the fans and gave what people actually wanted. And guess what? 71% Rotten Tomatoes, 54% Metacritic, and 8.2 on IMDb. Thus maybe if he didn't fire Zack Snyder and replace him with the Avengers guy, I think the DCEU would have been just as popular as the MCU. Considering the DCEU has world-class superheroes such as The Flash, Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman, and Aquaman, and several other characters that they're probably going to introduce as well. Considering that a lot of Marvel's cast was very, very obscure before, outside of the comic book community, and basically, DC had some of the most recognizable superheroes of all time, I find it astonishing that DC screwed the DCEU so up. And that is the failed MCU. And yeah, they're still going to be making DCEU movies. They're still going to continue making movies even the DCEU. But unlike the MCU, the DCEU is very organized. So there are some movies coming into the DCEU. The Suicide Squad, Aquaman 2, The Flash, and the Shazam sequel and the prequel that are all coming out. And apparently the Batman, even though they said that it's not a part of DCEU, it even has a different actor as well. And it doesn't seem like the Snyderverse is also coming back either, because they're also replacing Henry Cavill with a black Superman, which also does further bury the DCEU already. That they're always trying to replace actors in the movies. So that's basically it. Goodbye.